You may have noticed by now that gratitude practices have become extraordinarily popular, prescribed or recommended by most coaches, motivational speakers, spiritual guides and gurus, and even some therapists. But how is that supposed to be appropriate for someone like you dealing with something like cancer? Hopefully, nobody has ever said to you, "Oh, you have cancer? Just be grateful." Grateful for what? That it isn't worse, right? For all the good that is, right? Not bad ideas, but it just does not compute. It's not usually said that bluntly, but that's what it feels like, right? Dismissive, cold, uncaring, isolating, when you may not be searching for pity at all, but what you do want is to feel loved, cared for, understood, validated. You want to feel connected and safe, am I right? You don't need people to tell you to just be grateful. But what if I told you something crazy, like you can have all those aforementioned feelings and more by practicing gratitude and, more importantly, reap its healing benefits? How? Well, studies do support this, that things like gratitude or any therapy you decide to use can be helpful for cancer if it's something you decide to do and it's something that you believe in, not because somebody else told you you should do it. So, what better way to make this decision for yourself than to hear actual science and research studies, anecdotal evidence by the top scientists and experts in this field? So don't listen to me. I'm simply the presenter of data that you can reflect on and decide if it resonates and can be helpful for you. But just in case you're wondering, hi, I am Dr. Lisa Mateka, cancer transformation guide, naturopathic doctor, energy worker, transformational life coach. And I help those with cancer navigate their journey back to health and wellness to an even better state than before by awakening their own innate healing abilities and helping them to upgrade not only physically, but mentally, emotionally, energetically, and spiritually. So, we are going to get into a lot of science today, so bear with me, although I am going to try to keep it as brief and relevant as I can, but this is going to be a bit of a long one, so buckle up. Did you know there's actually a scientific standardized questionnaire used in health psychology settings called the GQ6? That's right, GQ6, standing for Gratitude Questionnaire 6-item form because it contains 6 questions. Just thought that was interesting. You will see and hear that gratitude is a bit more scientific than you may have thought. So there was so many studies on gratitude that a meta-analysis was done. Remember, a meta-analysis is essentially a study of studies, kind of trying to make sense of all of them to see if there can be a common thread, so to speak. So as recent as 2020, a meta-analysis was done by Day, Robert, and Rafferty. And they found 160 studies on gratitude, but only 56 met their strict criteria because there are high standards, typically high standards to meta-analyses, and this one was no exception. So basically, the 4 criteria for gratitude studies was: does the study deal with gratitude as a concept? Does the study deal with gratitude in a healthcare context and setting, which is going to be very relevant for y'all cancer patients? Is there enough substantive context to gratitude? Like, is it defined, theorized, and or discussed in the study? And is the source of this study substantive? Like, is it a peer-reviewed journal as opposed to just some newsletter or article? So those were some of the criteria. 56 were selected. And the objective The objective is quote unquote as follows. Identify theoretical frameworks that have shaped scholarship in the expression and reception of gratitude to draw out common threads and show areas of divergent thinking. Basically, that is a fancy way of saying the objective of the meta-analysis is really just to understand gratitude, basically, and how it works. Understand gratitude and how it works. So there were quite a few assumptions in this study. If you do end up looking at it, there are a few assumptions in this study that I personally don't agree with. They were essentially saying that, sure, gratitude can be expressed to inanimate objects, but really it's about expressing gratitude to another person. It's about interpersonal relationships for the giving and receiving, welcoming or withholding of gratitude. Really a big emphasis on it being about interpersonal relationships, which is also why they focus on a healthcare setting where gratitude was either given or not given to the benefactors or to the caretakers that were caring for the patients. So that's fine. That's what they did in the study, but I personally have a few issues with that. First of all, think gratitude goes much deeper than being grateful to other people. Sure, you can, and perhaps it's a beautiful, great practice to be grateful for other people, but it's not just about other people. Gratitude can be for anything, not just for what other people do, but for what the universe has given you, for example, for yourself, for just what is. And it doesn't have to be expressed to other people. It's really can just be an internal state, of which you just are, that which you vibrate, so to speak. So it can definitely go a lot deeper than just, I am grateful for these healthcare workers taking care of me, because you can be grateful for just about anything, brings me to also disagreeing with gratitude being context dependent. I mean, sure, I can't completely argue with that. Is it not much easier to be grateful to a loved one that did something really nice for us? Isn't that easier than to be grateful to a stranger that did something bad to us? And yet, for those who've been on the path, so to speak, on the personal development path or on the spiritual enlightenment track, or at least spiritual development, I mean, that's exactly what you do. You try to be grateful for everything, the good, the bad, the ugly, because ultimately everything is happening for your greatest and highest good and for you. And that's a whole nother situation. But just to explain some of the differences when it comes to, let's call it my type of gratitude, and when it comes to this type of gratitude in the literature, it's not exactly the same thing. And yet still, there have been found so many benefits, even in the literature. But I get ahead of myself. So like I said, the purpose of this meta-study is essentially to really understand gratitude. So I will just briefly mention, there were several other meta-narratives that are not really relevant to us here. Things like gratitude as social capital, gratitude as related to gifts, gratitude as related to care ethics, gratitude as related to staff well-being. And those can be interesting things to look into if you want. But there was a meta-narrative that they did mention entitled The Benefits of Gratitude, and that's really what we're interested in here. And I quote, "Overwhelmingly, the empirical work identified in this review report on the benefits of being grateful." Now, I'm basically just gonna read snippets of these different studies that were involved in the meta-analysis. Just gonna read a few different snippets that illustrate, that directly say or imply the benefits of gratitude, or that there is the existence of benefits of gratitude in healing in a healthcare setting. Gratitude has been investigated as a personality disposition or trait that is correlated with well-being, possibly with a causal relationship. Studies sought ways of measuring the beneficial effects of gratitude or elaborating associations of gratitude and other life satisfaction, and or evaluating gratitude interventions like journaling and or counting blessings exercises. So those are 3 types of studies they looked at. That was Wood et al. 2010. McCullough et al. 2001 offered an influential functional theory of gratitude and revealed it with empirical support. And reinforced it with empirical support. A landmark edited volume followed in 2004 called The Psychology of Gratitude. That's a big deal. A whole thing published called The Psychology of Gratitude. Thos et al., don't know if I'm saying that right, 2018 concluded that gratitude may improve quality of life and reduce psychological distress in patients receiving palliative care in Switzerland. A thematic analysis of interviews from a city in the US of patients who suffered a traumatic spinal cord injury found that those who appraised these adverse events as advantageous or positive through the lens of gratitude fared better, according to Chun and Lee 2013. Kreitzer et al. 2019 found that gratitude practice in an online therapeutic community led to improvements in stress, gratitude, and social support, although effects were short-lived. Musath and Jayasilan in 2016 analyzed questionnaires and conducted interviews with 8 patients receiving chemotherapy in an oncology ward in a hospital in India that had undergone a gratitude journaling intervention. And what they found was this journaling gratitude practice did boost subjective well-being and gave insights and reflections onto the nature of gratitude and their condition. Positive psychology was described by Duckworth et al. 2005 as a build what's strong rather than fix what's wrong approach. And this imagery has been at the heart of one of the most influential scientific models of gratitude, attributed first to Barbara Fredrickson in her Broaden and Build model. This model holds that positive emotions broaden people's momentary thought action repertoires and build their personal enduring resources. This is in contrast with negative emotions, which tend to narrow people's thought action repertoires, which makes sense as it makes for quick decision making in life threatening situations. Although the situations that bring forth positive emotions may be transient, Fredrickson argues that the personal resources one builds are durable and can be drawn upon later to cope and survive. Therefore, gratitude interventions are believed to have a beneficial effect when done consistently over time. And indeed, studies by these people do show decreased depressive symptoms and decreased stress. Now, straight from the MD Anderson Cancer Center, cancer patients, survivors, and caregivers have said that they've used gratitude to find the following benefits during their cancer experience: closer relationships with family and friends, reevaluation of priorities, personal development, and spiritual development, taking control of a personal health situation, setting and achieving new goals, and having greater flexibility, patience, and resilience. And many of the aforementioned studies have said that there is a causal relationship with gratitude and reduced stress, increased quality of life, increased well-being. Do you think all of these things transfer over to having a protective or healing benefit on those with cancer? I can tell you from personal experience they do, and from these reports as well. Also, it says on the MD Anderson Cancer website, often people think gratitude is merely ignoring the difficulties and the struggles and what's wrong while just focusing on the positive. But in reality, it allows the patient to accept what is happening while still finding joy through the struggle. There are many benefits to gratitude, and they include, remember, this is from the MD Anderson Cancer website, increase or resilience when faced with stress and adversity, open up to new opportunities and experiences, impact our physical responses such as lowering blood pressure, lowering stress, and increasing immunity, thus decreasing any further health complications, bring an increase in healthy behaviors such as exercising more, eating better, and doing more preventive health measures. And it contributes to more satisfying relationships with family members, friends, and other community members. Now I'll talk a little bit about Kelly A. Turner's research, which I've talked about many times before, but she is the one that has done decades of research collecting data on cancer patients who had spontaneous remissions. And she found 10 common healing factors among all of these, not sure, order of importance or anything like that. But of those 10, 3 are related to gratitude. One is increase positive emotions, which specifically said, such as gratitude, and these patients made it a point to practice this muscle at least 5 minutes daily. And then another factor was spiritual practice, and that spiritual practice was further defined as like a felt experience that often involve feelings of gratitude. And then another one of the common healing factors, the first one actually, although they're not in order, like I said, strong reasons for living. And strong reasons for living was defined as people focusing on moving toward what they wanted, not away from what they didn't want. So towards love, not just away from fear, which is related to gratitude because these people were essentially focusing on good things and not focusing on bad things. They weren't focusing on being scared of dying, and they weren't focusing on all the bad things that were going to happen. They were focusing on the good that was to come of what they did have to live for. So there's an argument that the spirit of gratitude is woven in that sort of thinking. And then there's this man Clive DeCarl, who owns a supplement company, so he funded some private research to see which supplements were the most effective for cancer. And what he found was that there really wasn't any common underlying link or factor when it comes to supplements. And he studied other things too, crystals, meditation practices, a couple other things too, and he didn't find a common thread there. What he did find, the main common thread he found, was gratitude. All of the cancer patients that did gratitude were the ones that healed. And funny enough, Kelly A. Turner found that same thing about the supplements. There really wasn't much of a common thread with supplements there. And then we have Dr. Joe Dispenza, famous author, speaker, presenter. I recommend his book, You Are the Placebo. So he says we need to dial down the analytical mind and increase suggestibility so that we can program our minds for us to be the placebo, increasing belief, acceptance, and the intention. And to do that, he said the most powerful way to increase suggestibility and turn down the analytical mind is with emotions like gratitude. And spiritual teachings have always taught us gratitude as an antidote to fear. And indeed, when practicing gratitude, they found in his people, because he does tests on his people, that it shut off receptors in the amygdala for fear and anxiety. And indeed, gratitude has been shown to, yes, decrease anxiety, depression, fear, and it increases serotonin and dopamine as well, and also increases sleep and mood. Sorry, I got a little distracted with that one. A big frog just jumped on my window. So, the famous cancer survivor Chris Wark from Chris Beats Cancer is mostly known for his anti-cancer diet, but his main lessons, because I've heard him speak, and this is his quote: I give my fear to God. I won't let fear steal my joy. I choose gratitude. Well, works for him. And then there's one of my favorite mentors, Peter Sage, and he has a saying. It goes a little something like this: and the real power of gratitude, as well as forgiveness and humility, is that they free our mental and emotional energies, allowing us to let go of negative feelings, bring in acceptance, and the recognition of gifts in the events that have happened, and fast track us to authenticity and the realization that I am already what I seek. Some of you will appreciate that. Well, I'd be remiss if I didn't at least mention energetically the frequency of gratitude, which there are people that have said they've measured and it is scientific. I don't have the scientific proof, but the frequency of gratitude is very similar to the frequency of love. And as we know, love is healing. And it's the antidote to fear. And fear is the opposite of healing. Fear is disease causing. And the frequency of gratitude is like a frequency of abundance as well. It transmits the frequency, ah, I have all I need and more. I love everything. And so that is then magnetized back to you with like the law of attraction. And you can attract healing to yourself essentially. Anyways, I consider that scientific, but I don't exactly have the peer-reviewed journal publications to prove it. And speaking of the law of attraction, if you've seen the documentary The Secret, the woman healed herself of breast cancer, I do believe it was, and she used the words, "Thank you for my healing." And this is, she wasn't healed yet. She pretty much had just gotten the diagnosis. She didn't do any conventional treatment. She did listen to funny movies. I had a video on that, The Power of Laughter. And every day she focused on feeling gratitude and saying, "Thank you for my healing." So, anyways, there's a little bit of science for you. So you make the decision. Is any of this worth trying? Is there a connection here between gratitude, feeling better, having better, more emotionally aligned feelings, having improved mental health, less stress, less anxiety, less fear? Is there a correlation with that in healing? And there is. And that correlation is actually a causation. But anyways, I will let you make your own decision on that. But obviously, I'm a bit biased here and I will make a recommendation. What if you considered everything that happened in life either a warning of what you didn't want or an example of what you did want? Or everything you see in life, not just what happens to you, but everything you see in the world is either a warning or an example, a warning of what you don't want or an example of what you do want. So which is the cancer? I mean, obviously, probably it's a warning. And that's what many people see cancer as. It's like a rumble strip. That's something you're going off course a little bit. That rumble strip that you're going off course a little bit. Or it's the warning light on the dash of your car, like, check this out. Something ain't right here. So you could be grateful at the very least for that, for this warning, because there is still time to do something and to make a change. And that's what people in retrospect end up being grateful for. I think I've made a video on that, of all the things people end up being grateful for after they've gone through a bit of their journey. It might not be, doable or easy right now, but people have so much to be thankful for in retrospect. And that's some of it. Thankful for this wake-up call. It shifted them to change things in their life. It put things in perspective, what's really important, fueled them back on their dreams and their path and all sorts of stuff. So I guess it's up to you to find the gold. And we can always be thankful for what was to shape us into who we are, and for what is to find the gold. There's either lessons here or something. And gratitude for what could be, because a new future is always available and you can envision it right now, the future you want, healed, vital, and vibrant. And you can be grateful for that now in advance. I mean, that's part of how people heal. That's law of attraction stuff. But we can stay on the published science about, at the very least, gratitude reducing stress, increasing quality of life. And just those two things alone are really important when it comes to cancer. Stress management is key, 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 key. and just trying to keep the emotions positive, the well-being positive. And that's something gratitude can help with. Will fast track you to some healing. But anyways, don't take my word for it. Feel free to review your own science or just test it for yourself. Be your own experiment. But, again, these tests, not just doing it one day, they usually require a little bit of consistency and time. But anyways, I want to offer you my free gift. I had already talked about it in this video, Kelly A. Turner's research. So I basically did a summation. I wrote an article. You could call it a short ebook, 38 pages on the 10 common healing factors among those who have a spontaneous remission, what they have in common. That's not the title. The title is 10 Common Healing Factors Among Cancer Survivors Who Beat the Odds. And of course, the premise is if they can do it, so can you. So click on the link in the description box, get your free gift so you can find out what these 10 common healing factors are and start implementing them today to turn your diagnosis around. All right, with that being said, do please like, comment, follow, all that kind of stuff so that we can get this kind of thing to reach more people. And thank you for being here through this kind of long video that I admit was probably not the easiest to endure. But thank you, and I hope you got something out of it. And much love. Bye-bye.